Hello, welcome to another episode of Forgotten Cemeteries, Pacific Northwest. Today we're at the hidden Jones Pioneer Cemetery, which is located in Portland, Oregon, Multnomah County. However, it is classified as the Sylvan neighborhood, I believe is how you pronounce it. Alternative names to the cemetery include Jones Oregon Historic, Mount Zion, and Sylvan. So let's go meet some of the local residents and hear their story. Well, there's about 734 signs warning you about private property and no parking and you're on camera, and pretty exhausting reading all the signs actually moving in. But there is a church parking lot here, and I guess they ask that you don't park there. Actually, they kind of demand it. They're pretty blunt about it. So if you visit the cemetery, just kind of pull into the cemetery and there's like a little roundabout. But a little bit of history of this cemetery. It was established in 1854. Some sources say 1872, but there is a headstone with the death year of 1854 of a William M. Jones. It is located on the original Nathan B. Jones donation land claim and is a Metro Pioneer Cemetery. My Oregon Burial Site Guide mentioned that this is the only Metro Pioneer Cemetery that was not placed in the hands of Multnomah County by legislative action. Not sure if that's still true, but just a little tidbit of information. The land was also donated by Nathan B. Jones in 1872 to Multnomah County, as he wanted to ensure protection of a particular grave from further development. The first burial in the cemetery is William M. Jones, Nathan's father. Nathan would actually have his own headstone erected prior to his death, so that's a bit different. Wise choice based on what we've seen in our cemetery travels. I also believe we have a cemetery inside of a cemetery, as a Jewish cemetery is also located here, I believe. I guess we'll see that, but I did read that an L-shaped hedge separates the two cemeteries, and maybe you'll see that during the tour. We've got Civil War tales, unique headstones, the rare neighbors of the woodcraft symbol on one of them, Roman god references, potentially Portland's first hippie, and a victim of murder at this cemetery. So Merry Christmas. And our first stop is Lieutenant William S. Munger. No permanent place for his headstone, I guess, but just sort of leaned up against this tree. Looking him up, he was the first lieutenant in the Michigan 12th Regiment Infantry. William had the lovely pleasure of being in one of the most brutal Civil War battles, and that would be the Battle of Shiloh, which, ironically, Shiloh means place of peace. And that battle was anything but peace, if you know about it. This one would showcase Ulysses S. Grant versus Albert Sidney Johnston. Johnson would actually die in this battle, being struck behind the knee, and the bullet would hit an artery. Johnson's crew started to notice him on and off fainting during the battle, to the point one of his troops asked him if he was wounded. Johnson would reply, "Yes, and I fear seriously." Johnson's whole boot was basically filled with blood at a certain point, so it was becoming noticeable. He wasn't in great shape. His troops would remove him from his horse and await medics, but he would eventually die an hour after the bullet wound entered. Strangely enough, staff found a tourniquet in his pocket, so I don't know why he never used it. And sadly, his horse named Fire Eater was also wounded in battle, in fact 3 times. But unfortunately, Fire Eater would die that day, the same day as Johnson, from my readings. This death of Johnson would be a huge blow to the Confederate morale, not only to the South, but to everyone overall, because the reality of the Civil War hit the entire nation, with 24,000 soldier casualties in just 2 days. So awesome news. For once, the Pioneer headstones are away from the traffic, so sound should be good on this one. Very quiet cemetery overall so far. Here we have the headstone of Minnie Hoffman, and she displays the rare neighbors of the woodcraft symbol here in the center. I hope you guys can see that. There's a little bit of moss and lichens growing on there, but you'll see courage, hope, and remembrance as their 3 words in their little saying. It always seems like it's 3 words with these old orders. I don't know if there's any meaning behind just having 3. So a little history for those not familiar with the neighbors of the woodcraft. A woman named C.C. Van Orsdal passed the resolution to break off from the Woodmen of the World fraternity and form the Pacific Circle, Women of the Woodcraft. This section was first located in Colorado, but would relocate to Portland, Oregon in 1905, where it remained until the 1970s. The neighbors of the woodcraft had a ritual which included annual passwords, initiation rites, and a ritual obligation. The neighbors of the woodcraft would meet once a year. Each member was required to reaffirm their obligation on obligation night. So this is pretty serious stuff here. Now is the abbreviation for them. We now know Now Building in downtown Portland as the Tiffany Center. In 1993, Now sold the building and moved out its remaining office space. And we have the headstone of Nathan B. Jones, and hopefully that shot's showing up, but probably the most famous person in this cemetery, I'd say, and an Oregon immigrant of 1847, and potentially Portland's first hippie, in my opinion. He would settle at the head of Tanner Creek, which I read Tanner Creek flows along the Sunset Highway. This would be West Haven, Sylvan, Oregon. Nathan would name the area Zion Town, but I guess that confused people because there was already a post office named Zion. Historians are unsure if he named it Zion after Mount Zion, but maybe some biblical reasons behind it, but postal authorities would turn down the name. A resident suggested Sylvan from the Roman deity of the woods, Silvanus, or god of the countryside and protector of the forest. So now you can tell everyone where the area of Sylvan got its name. Back to Nathan. People described him as a hermit, sort of a hippie, if you will. By Portland standards, this would be perfectly normal, but he would splash all these like different colored paints on the side of his house, sort of psychedelic colors, if you will. What classifies as psychedelic colors, I don't know, but apparently it was very elaborate. Overall, strange paintings and murals were all over the outside of his house as well. To the point, residents had like no description for him. It was just odd. People would speak tales of Nathan giving epic speeches about how Zion would become the political and cultural capital of Oregon. To be honest, I don't think he was far off since we're so close to Portland here. In January of 1894, Nathan disposed of some property to Henry Reed. Reed pays him with a check, and I guess Nathan deposited it in the Portland bank. It was thought that Nathan retained the cash in his house at the time. January 17th, Nathan was clubbed by what was thought to be a robber who broke into his house. Nathan sadly didn't survive the attack and died January 25th, 1894, a few days after the event. Someone said on his headstone it reads, came to his death by the hand of an assassin, but I haven't seen that yet, and I'll have to look a little closer. But oddly, his assailant was acquitted on charges, but I couldn't locate that person's exact name. And the first burial in the cemetery belongs to William M. Jones. If the age listed is true, he would be 76 years old. William was born in the year 1778, so one of our earlier birth years that we've seen in our travels. I believe Robert Byrd, though, is still the oldest so far as birth date, and that was like 1776, I want to say. We are seeing the Masonic symbol on his headstone, and I'll show you that during the tour. It's hard to track down William. No birth year, no birthplace, and no immigration year is found in my searches. However, ancestry was sort of hinting at New Hampshire. In the year 1847, his son Nathan is listed as immigrating to Oregon with a bunch of Jones family members. I'm guessing William was part of that crew and just isn't listed for some reason. Records show that William was married to Huldah W. Harris Jones, but the only thing I found on her was they got married in Salem, New Hampshire in 1803, and Huldah sort of goes poof from history. I'm not sure what happened to her. And here we have Lydia C. Snow Humphrey, born in 1817 in Mill Creek, Ohio. Died at the young age of 41. Her index said she had an ulcerated throat as the cause of death. Not sure if it was strep or diphtheria, because remember we talked about diphtheria outbreak during the 1860s in Oregon at Crooked Finger Cemetery. She was married to a Hoffman Munson Humphrey, and appears the couple was part of the 1852 migration wagon train to Oregon. And more importantly, a man named Ben Snipes drove for the Humphrey family, an individual who is known to be in the Oklahoma Cowboy Hall of Fame and known as the Northwest Cattle King. Apparently this guy was famous and well known for his S branding. If you're a historical piece collector, you can buy the famous original S branding tool for the cheap price of $1,500. Alright, for some reason Find a Grave shows a blank spot next to an Eliza Dowlinger, who is the wife of a Henry Dowlinger. So allegedly Henry's over here maybe, based on what the Find a Grave profile says, and I can only assume he has no marker, but we'll talk about his wife on the left in the next little segment. But Henry was a member of the Independent Order of the Oddfellows, and at one point almost had his life taken by murder. He had a business partner named William Hand, and the two took over the Centennial, which was a radical pro-Southern Democrat publication at the time. Well, problem was Henry and William, they had different views and turned it into a pro-Union Republican publication, so I imagine the subscribers were very upset about that. So the previous owner of the publication catches wind about this, and he's furious. So he starts another rival newspaper again and decides he's just going to kill Henry. He ends up attacking Henry with a revolver on the street. I'm not sure if it was broad daylight or what, but somehow Henry disarms the guy, luckily. So luckily he lived, but the pro-Confederate guy, yeah, his newspaper went out of business very quickly, as you can imagine. And here we have allegedly a doctor, Eliza Adeline Humphrey Dowlinger, tough one to say, but wife of Henry we just talked about, and daughter of Lydia Snow Humphrey we visited earlier. Did notice doctor in her title, and she was a pioneer physician in Portland. Tried to locate where or what her practice was, but kept coming up empty. I could not find that information, but someone on Find a Grave claimed that she was a pioneer physician in the area. It's kind of a rarity in our travels. It appears she did die young, though, at the age of 37. Here is Isaac Haley Gove, born in 1828 in the rare state find of Maine. You don't see a whole lot of Maine people. Now, not much on his youth, except he moved in 1844 to be a carpentry apprentice, and this would come in handy when he landed in Oregon. But he would first travel to California in the famous year of 1849 for obvious reasons. Then came to Oregon in 1850, where he would build the famous Lot Whitcomb sidewheel, the first steam-powered craft built on the Willamette River in the state of Oregon, and rated at 140 horsepower, so a hot rod there. This ship would help accelerate the economy in the area and pretty much establish Milwaukee, Oregon. Did well while it was here. The problem was it was really expensive to operate the ship, I guess. So in 1854, the sidewheeler was let out to the Pacific Ocean and towed down to San Francisco. And by 1868, the unit was put out of service. Alrighty, time for the fun part, the tour, like I always say. Visit the cemetery, you kind of pull into this parking lot here, and they're hardcore, man. Let me tell you, that church, they're wound up about parking in that parking lot. I'm sorry if someone from the church is watching this video, but they're very just super serious about people parking. So just pull into the cemetery, I'm assuming, and just find a little spot. It has like a little roundabout, so overall it's pretty quiet. I'm not sure if anyone visits up here that much. Let's go talk about him. We'll build the Lot Whitcomb. We talked about Lydia. I believe her real headstones there. It's like in this cemetery there's like monuments, memorials, and then there's just these other headstones. And we talked about Dr. Eliza. Allegedly her husband's right there. I'm not really sure what was up with that. Maybe the headstone was damaged and removed, I don't know. Humphrey is a popular name over here. I think the road actually to get into here is Humphrey. Sure that's anything. It looks like some type of row marker. You have this cool little path here you could walk on. I don't know what the rocks symbolize. Some of these headstones. Now there is a Jewish cemetery, I believe, in here, and it is separated by a hedge, and we'll see that during the tour. We won't go in, just out of respect for their zone. But I think someone online said there was some meaning behind the stones. I do see one of these laying around once in a while. There are some new burials here once in a while. But there's a lot of space open for expansion. We'll just take this little path for a little bit and get to the pioneers over here. What? I think. Epic one. And a Futher. I want to say it's not, I don't think it's this individual particularly, but whoever recommended the name Sylvan for the area, I believe their last name was Prince. But I don't think it was one of them listed. I don't know who that is. We'll find our lieutenant there. Unfortunately, it looks like that headstone was vandalized at one time. Here's the famous Nathan Jones memorial, because his headstone is actually down there. But I wish you guys can, maybe you guys can see it. It's kind of showing up, but it will say came to his death by the hand of an assassin. Pretty unique. You can see here, Zion was founded in 1850. Kind of, because they changed the name. But yeah, there's the hedge that kind of separates the two cemeteries. I think I did read online it's a cemetery within a cemetery. And we saw that with Robert Byrd in a way. There was Robert Byrd Cemetery, and I can't remember the other name for the cemetery next to it. Here's a Minnie's headstone with that Neighbors of the Woodcraft symbol that is a rarity so far in my travels. This is the only second one I've seen. But overall, a pretty nice, quiet cemetery. I highly recommend it. See if anything sticks out over here. I do see a military headstone looking guy ahead. A lot of these seem recent over here. World War II. Looks like someone left him a little Christmas gift too. That's neat. And same for that individual. But hope you enjoyed the visit. This is kind of a hidden one in Portland. I don't think a whole lot of people know about. If you have any recommendations for other cemeteries to visit in Oregon or even Southern Washington, feel free to comment below. Hope you enjoyed the video and the story of Nathan Jones, a very interesting individual. Stay safe out there and have a great Christmas.